My name is Justin Webb, and for the last 6 years, I've been helping teens and young adults build their relationships with Jesus Christ. It's a passion of mine, and it's a passion birthed out of my own encounter with Jesus. It's an encounter that saved me, that changed me, and that put me on a different path. This is that story.
Teacher's Review.
When I was a kid, my mom used to go get groceries and I would go with her. She would always get 2 gallons of milk. One would go in the freezer and one would go in the fridge. And I would always help her unload the groceries when we got home. And I would always make sure that I grabbed those 2 gallons of milk because I wanted to show my mom that I was strong. I was strong enough to carry those big, heavy gallons of milk. And at first I would grab 1 gallon at a time, but what I noticed is when I would pick up that 1 gallon with one of my hands, my shoulders would kind of go off, right? And I'd be trying to walk with this thing, but it would keep pulling me to that one side, even kind of swinging around and hitting me in my leg, and it made it hard to walk. So eventually, I would pick up 1 gallon and I would also pick up the other. And I had 2 gallons that was a lot heavier than just one, and it would bog me down and it would slow me down. But I found that it kept me balanced. It kept me walking in a straight line. Now, if I went too fast, I'd fall flat on my face because I couldn't stop. But I could walk straight. And if I took one step after another, even if it was slowly, I would eventually get to where I needed to go. I feel like I've been doing that for most of my life. You see, for a lot of my life, the thoughts that I had in my mind and the emotions that I felt and just life in general would keep me off balance. And when I felt off balance, I would go to pick up this other weight to try to balance everything out. And that weight was this uh, desire to get everything in place, to get all the puzzle pieces exactly where they needed to be. You know what I'm saying? That weight was me taking control of everything in my life. That was me operating in all the correct ways to do things, right? And I thought if I carried that weight, that I could just keep moving forward, that I could just keep walking forward, and maybe eventually I would get to a place where I could take a breath, where I could relax, where I could rest. Maybe, just maybe, I could eventually get to a place where I could find peace. When I was 22 years old, I dropped out of college. And it wasn't because I was partying too much, and it wasn't because I didn't care. Although I have lied and told people both of those things. I think it helped my pride to make it look like I did it on purpose, but the fact is I couldn't hack it. At that time in my life, I was drowning in my own thoughts. My emotions were bigger than I could handle, and life just really had me off balance and off track. The fact is, I didn't know what side was up and what side was down. I couldn't really do anything of any value because just being took a lot of effort. From the outside, you would have probably looked at my life and said, man, he's got it good. Like he's going to college, he's doing his thing. And I did have it good. But for some reason, in my mind, it felt like I was drowning, like I was fighting for air. And just that fight alone had me tired and wore out. I was falling apart. I remember going in for a test one day and I had studied for this test. Like I had probably studied more for this test than any other test I had studied for before that. I sat down for this test and I had my backpack sitting at the right side of me. I pulled my stuff out and got ready for the test, and they passed the test out. And I look at the piece of paper and I see the line where it says, your name. And I kind of feel my heart start to race and like I can't catch my breath. And I just ignore it. I put my name on the paper. I look at the first question and I read it and it makes sense, but the answer is not coming to my mind. So I'm like, well, I'll come back to that one. And I read the second question and I read it and it doesn't really make sense. And there's this confusion that sets in. And then there's this panic that sets in. And then I'm feeling like my heart is beating too fast and I can't catch my breath. So I move to the third question and it gets worse. And the fourth question and the fifth question. And it gets worse and it gets worse. And I'm at the point where, like, I'm afraid I'm going to pass out in this chair. So I pack up all my stuff. I stand up in the middle of class. I don't say anything to the teacher and I walk out. By the time I made it through the door and into the hallway, I was so panicked that I didn't know what to do. I picked up the phone and called my mom, and she tried to explain to me what a panic attack was, but I didn't get it, and I didn't get how to make it stop. All I knew was I was never stepping foot in that classroom again, and I didn't. That night was one of the darkest nights of my life. That night, I trapped myself in my room. I was in there by myself, and there was a bottle of liquor, there was some weed, and there was some pills that a doctor had given me to help with panic attacks. I drank the liquor, I smoked the weed, and I took some of the pills. And by the end of the night, I was laying on my bed, and I knew that everything was my fault. So I looked up at God and I said, God, I don't blame you. I'm a mistake. I've messed everything up. I'm a failure. I don't know why I'm like this, but I know it's not your fault, God. I went to sleep. Next morning, I woke up. I called my mom, told her I needed to come home. She called my dad and then called me back. Said, your dad said he just wants his son back. Pack up your stuff and head home. And she said, I agree with your dad. We just want you back. We just want you healthy. We just want you to get back on your feet and back to being who you are. See, I guess I hadn't been myself for a long time. My parents just cared about me, and that care and that love and that support in that moment gave me the courage to go face people's opinions because I knew they were going to know that I was a failure. It gave me the courage to face the embarrassment, just the feeling of letting everybody down. And that night, I packed my bags and I went home. When I got home, I took some time to deal with the feeling of being a failure and the embarrassment. I lived with my parents for a while. I applied to some jobs and eventually got one. Luckily, my parents were supportive, and I had some good friends around me that they tried their best to understand what was going on with me. And I made myself a promise. I would never quit like that again. I would never get beat like that. I would never let my family down like that. I would never let myself down. I would never let my friends down like that again. I felt so embarrassed and beat down because I couldn't make it in college, all because my brain wouldn't work right. How weak was I? So I made up my mind and I said, I'm going to work hard and I'm never going to quit. And I did work hard. And that hard work got me an apartment and it got me a nice truck. And I upgraded that apartment to a house. And I upgraded that nice truck to my dream truck. And working hard got me a lot. Working hard got me all the things I thought would make me happy. But every once in a while, those thoughts would creep back in. And I would just work harder. And then I would party harder. And if that didn't work, I would buy myself something nice. And if that didn't work, I would go on vacation. Work hard, party hard, repeat. This was the rhythm. This was the system. No matter where I got, it felt like I could not escape the thoughts. Thoughts of being a failure. Thoughts of not being good enough. The thoughts of the world being better without me in it. When those thoughts would get too overwhelming, I would lean back into work hard. Because if you work hard enough, eventually everything will work itself out. It's what I thought. I was wrong. I did this same pattern for almost 10 years. It was crazy. And in the midst of that, I tried to build a relationship with God. Well, really, I tried to do enough that God would take my pain away. Like if I could get on his good side, maybe He might hear me on what's going on in my brain and in my mind and in my emotions, and he might actually fix it. Didn't work. I kept struggling. And when I would struggle, I would go back to what I knew: work, party, repeat. In this time, one of my closest friends had these parents who were like Bible thumping, Jesus freak, crazy people. And they kept bugging him to go to this men's retreat. And this retreat was for people to be introduced to a relationship with Jesus, or to develop their relationship with Jesus, or get them back on track, or whatever along those lines. Eventually, they started asking me because they wanted him to go. Eventually, we got tired of it and just said yes so that they would stop asking. Now, I don't know if they knew it or not, but at that time I was really struggling. Because the thoughts that used to kind of beat me up every once in a while now were nonstop. There'd be points I'd be driving down the road for work and could not turn off these thoughts that I wasn't good enough, that I was a failure, that life would just be better for other people if I wasn't around, that I just always mess things up, that I can never get anything right. These thoughts would just berate me and they would just never end. Be up all night. I'd be sick to my stomach in the mornings because I just couldn't get it to stop. So they invite us to this retreat in the middle of this happening with me, and I did not want to go. This is not my vibe. Last thing I want to do is sit around with some grown men crying and sharing our stories around a campfire telling Bible stories. Nah, that's not me. It's not for me. But as I was there, I began to see that there was guys who were a lot like me. And there was guys who were not like me at all. But all of them were telling me about this relationship that they had with Jesus. They were telling me about the Holy Spirit and the power of the Holy Spirit. And they were telling me about this loving Father in heaven who cared about me and wanted me to be free and wanted me to have breakthrough. And I didn't know about any of that, but what I did know is those guys had something I didn't have. They had peace. And when I was around them, I had peace. When I was in that place, I slept like a restful sleep, and that hadn't happened in a long time. The more I was around them, the more peace I had. And after 2 days of being around them, I knew that I wanted more. Then one night, there was this altar call. And this altar call had a message before it. And what all of this really means is that there was a guy who went up there and preached his heart out. I'm saying this guy was probably preaching this fire message that would have benefited my life a lot. But if I'm being real, years later, I don't remember a word that guy said. What I do remember is that after he spoke, there was another guy who came up and said, if there's anybody in the room who wants prayer, come up to the front of the room and our prayer team will pray with you. And the moment he said that, there was this battle going on in my mind. There would be one thought that said, you need to go up to the front right now and get prayed for. And there was this other thought that would come up and say, you better not. That's going to ruin your life. And then all these thoughts kept coming in, one after another, one after another. Each one telling me, you should do it, you shouldn't do it, you should do it, you shouldn't do it. By the end of it, I was so twisted up that I felt like I was going to throw up. If you had seen me, you would have thought I was crazy. I was sitting in the back of this sanctuary just pacing back and forth. And finally, I made a deal with God. I told God, if you want me to get prayed for, I'll get prayed for, but only by this one guy who's standing up front. He is from my hometown, and I will let him pray for me. He is the only one from my hometown, and I will let him pray for me. But if he is not free to pray when I get up there, I'm out of here. I thought I had it made, because my whole way walking up there to the front of that room, that guy was praying for somebody else. So I was like, cool. He's not going to be praying for me. I'm going to be out of here. I'm going to go get some food. We're going to be good. I got about 2 steps away from him, and all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, "Hey man, what you need?" I didn't realize that question was going to change my life. My response and God's response to my response changed my life forever. And the guy looked at me and said, "Hey man, what do you need?" I answered him and I said, "I want a relationship with Jesus like you guys have been talking about. I want a relationship with the Holy Spirit like you guys have been talking about. I want to surrender my life to the Lord. I want to be free and I want to have peace." And in that moment, my body started getting hot and my hands started shaking. And all I can tell you is that God was more real to me in that moment than anything else was. I started swaying back and forth, and I had this thought come into my mind that said, right now, you have a choice. You can fall back to the ground, and I felt like it was like a trust fall. And you can do this trust fall, or you can stand up, stay exactly where you're at. And I knew immediately something inside of me was saying, if you do this fall, this is you giving yourself to the Lord. So I chose to give myself to the Lord. And I fell back. Those guys caught me. I didn't hurt myself. But as I fell back, they were still praying for me. And what I felt in that moment was so incredible. I can't really explain it to you. But in that moment, I knew God was real. I knew that He loved me, and I knew that He had me wrapped up in that moment. I knew He was with me. And those guys kept praying for me, and that moment changed my life. I will never be the same again. And at the end of the prayer, I stood up and I was kind of collecting myself, and this guy comes up and he taps me on the shoulder and he says, "Hey, I don't know you and I don't know what you're going through. But I do know that God told me to tell you that the weight is off." And when he said that, it felt like somebody took a weight off my chest and I was able to breathe right for the first time in a long time. Because of that moment, nobody will ever be able to tell me that God is not real, that Jesus did not die on the cross. Jesus did die on the cross for me and for you, and God is real and He does love us. And there was a passion ignited in that moment that made me just want to serve Him, that made me just want to tell people about Jesus so that they could experience the freedom that I've experienced, so that they could experience the relationship with Jesus that I have gotten to experience over the last 7 years. This passion and this fire has led to some of the greatest things in my life. One being my wife, another one being my daughter, both a product of me serving Him, serving Jesus. So thankful for those two and everything that God has provided in my life. He's even given me an opportunity to help plant a church in Lakeway, Texas. It is Rescue Church Austin, and me and my wife work under Pastors Jeff and Kelly Kuchar. And it is a blessing, and it is an honor, and it is difficult, and it is hard sometimes, but it is a blast. It is a joy. And as for my depression and my anxiety that day, God delivered me. Now I have had to build some healthy habits so that I don't go back into that, so that I don't live with an anxious mind and depressed all the time. But guess what? God has given me the tools to do that too. And I don't have to pick up the milk jug anymore to balance my life out. Because what I didn't know all those years ago was that working hard wasn't going to get me there. Working hard is good. Being diligent is good. But what I needed was Jesus. Turns out when you're walking with Jesus, you walk a lot more balanced.